So how much do we know about what happened in Lockport?
Well, we haven't collected any of those carcasses yet for testing, but just based on the number of carcasses from other parts of Manitoba that have been tested at the provincial lab, um, most of those are suspected to be a form of this highly pathogenic avian influenza virus, so this H5 virus. So those get tested at the provincial lab, and then they go for confirmation at the national lab. And just based on the number and the distribution, we suspect that the same disease is killing these birds in Lockport.
When you say based on the number, is if there were 3 birds, you wouldn't worry? Like, can you, elaborate a bit?
Well, it's a bit of an interesting situation this year because we haven't seen this level of mortality in geese. So the virus is something that the birds have evolved with. This latest virus is one that came to North America in 2021. And it's an interesting one because typically these viruses don't harm migratory birds. They carry them, they transmit them, they can really become harmful to domestic poultry, but typically they don't kill wild birds. And since this incursion of this latest virus, that's been changing. And we suspect that the high rate of mortality that we're seeing now is related to us seeing a peak in the virus when we typically have already lost most of our birds to migration, and also just the fact that the birds are under tremendous thermal stress this time of year when we have really cold conditions.
The virus is changing here or changing everywhere? What do we understand about how it might be adapting?
Yeah, it's changing everywhere. So it came over from Eurasia in 2021, and it moved across the continent really quickly, much quicker than other viruses have. And it recombines with our North American lineage viruses, so it's constantly adapting. So it's very capable of adaptation, and that's why we've seen it move across a huge number of different bird species and also into a huge variety of mammals also.
Um, how concerning is this for you?
It's definitely concerning because it's not something we've seen before. So people have been working a long time on avian influenza, and we haven't seen this level of mortality before, or just like I said, the number of different species that have been impacted. To date, we haven't detected an effect on goose survival. So Canada goose survival rates in adults and juveniles have been relatively unchanged, but our data from that, which comes from banding them annually, it lags a bit behind time, So, our latest estimates are 2023 estimates. So it's possible that, it's having more of an impact in the last year or two than it has since it came in 2021.
Remind us about the spread. I mean, obviously it's changing and morphing, but remind us about what we know about avian flu as it's presented in the past. And the question actually, to make it more specific, is coming because our videographer who took these images in Lockport yesterday, one of these geese looks like appears that he was eaten by, a scavenger. Can a predator be infected if the carcass does, if it is confirmed to have avian flu?
Yes, there's a huge variety of scavengers, which has already been shown to be infected this fall. So from the provincial vet lab, we have detections of the H5 form of this virus in coyotes, in otters, and foxes, and ravens, and crows, and snowy owls, and bald eagles. So definitely scavengers can become infected.
Help us understand the geese populations. So you see, it's the startling images, right? Seeing all these geese on the retention pond in Niverville, and now these images in Lockport last night, all these geese all over the ice. Once it's in a population are geese particularly being affected right now all over the place, or are these populations connected somehow?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and the virus has a very cyclic nature annually. So it really peaks in late November, December, January. And most of these geese, when they're here in the summer, so the birds that we're seeing now, they're a combination of geese from different areas. So we know from bands that we've recovered, and also just based on the size of the geese, there's birds that nest in Nunavut, and also from northern Manitoba, and then also from ones that nest in southern Manitoba here. And it's very cyclic in that in the spring and summer, those birds don't have any active infections of the virus, although they do have evidence of past exposure. So a very high proportion of the population's been exposed and survived. And then they come south and they mix with ducks, which are really what is thought to be the main reservoir of the virus. They become exposed to ducks, and when the weather gets cold and the birds concentrate in the last remaining open water, the virus moves through the population, or what's left of the population here, very quickly. And that's what we think is causing this peak in mortality now.
Okay, this may be an ignorant question, but why are ducks not all over the place then because of this? Or are they affected differently?
Well, we don't know for sure, but we know that ducks have a lot of background immunity from exposure to low pathogenicity avian flu viruses. So they've evolved with avian flu. They tend to be infected at a high rate, and perhaps that offers them some increased level of immunity to the virus.
We should remind for listeners that are just sort of leaning into this now, how dangerous is this virus to humans?
So Public Health Agency of Canada, who's the authority on human health, they still consider it low risk to humans. But people should definitely take precautions. So they shouldn't be handling wild birds which have died for suspicious reasons or which appear sick. And they should also not allow their pets to interact with those sick or dead birds either. So
if you find a dead carcass on or near your property, what should your step be for the cleanup process?
Well, we have a sort of a coordinated approach with the province to become aware of events where there's large mortality events or any mortality events, and that's to call the Turn-In Poachers tip line, which is 1-800-782-0076, and that just allows people to report the case. There's not a guarantee that it'll be necessarily cleaned up, because that depends on a lot of considerations like safe ice conditions, open water, things like that. Mm-hmm. But at least it makes us aware of the presence of dead birds and perhaps gathering some for testing.
You ever seen anything like this before, Frank?
No, I haven't. No, the images are pretty striking. I was down in Niverville and just seeing the number of dead birds on that pond or the several ponds in town was pretty striking. And in communication with other colleagues across Canada, just the number of dead birds in one area is not something that they've experienced either.
So just as a last question, then, what are they telling you from other provinces then? Are they having the same thing right now?
Yeah, it's starting to peak or to kick up in Ontario right now. So they're definitely having more cases, more mortality events, and also just sick birds that people are calling. But it's not at the scale of mortality that we have seen yet, possibly because they don't have the ice conditions that we do and the cold weather, and maybe that's to come. But talking to some colleagues in Saskatchewan that do still have open water and birds, they're not seeing mortality there yet. Okay, well, maybe more questions and answers around some of this, but we appreciate your time today. Thank you. Thanks very much. Frank Baldwin, Canadian Wildlife Service biologist. More dead geese found in Manitoba. Images by CBC News videographer Justin Fraser yesterday showed 50 geese in Lockport out on the ice dead. Last week, the 165 geese, 165 of them found dead on the Niverville retention pond, were confirmed for avian flu. The ones in Lockport we have not yet confirmed.